Welcome, Rabbi Weiss. We're starting our interview. This is my pleasure to host you here today in my program called Gupshup Corner. First of all, I have got a question from you. When I see your a badge you have written down on here, it says Jews, not Zionist. Absolutely.
Yes,
So,
yes,
how do you differentiate, or do you differentiate that Zionists are not Jews, or
right,
Jews are not Zionists? So, if you can
right,
elaborate a little bit.
yes. Yeah, and with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, and that I may be worthy of conveying His message. So, inshallah, with the help of the Almighty, sanctify His name, and again, inshallah, hopefully bring peace to the world. Amen. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to all the people who are seeing your. I'm sure that it is a distinguished audience that you have, and that with God's help, they should spread the word. We hope. So, like I say, that will the result to be sanctifying God's name and bring peace to the world. Um, my name is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss of Neturei Karta, Jews United Against Zionism. The the world looks at the conflict, the turmoil, as the Palestinian people properly call it, the Nakba, this terrible tragedy that is happening in Palestine, in the Holy Land, as the world looks at this as if it's a conflict, a direct conflict between two religions, between Judaism, the religion Judaism, and Islam, and between Arabs and pointedly Muslims and Jewish people. We are here to, with God's help, to show that this is a total misnomer, that it's totally a false narrative, that in truth, the issue here is a conflict between God-fearing people and a movement, a political movement made up of people who mostly even threw away entirely the concept of belief in God. It's a political nationalist movement called Zionism against people of different religions, the Jewish people and against the Palestinian people. It's clearly not Judaism against Islam. It's clearly a movement against Judaism and against the Islamic people and against the Arab people. So we'll start with God's help to understand Judaism is a religion. It is a covenant that the children of Israel, who was Jacob, their
Yes.
grandchildren, great grandchildren, they made a covenant on Mount Sinai after they left Egypt. This is around 3,000 years ago. They made a covenant with God to uphold the commandments of the
Okay.
Torah.
So I'm extremely sorry. I might gonna interrupt you like in between to elaborate that question. When you talk about Jacob, right? So
Yes,
we call it as a Muslim Yaqub, right?
Jacob. Yeah,
Yes. So the Jacob um, got married and he got wives, plus he got 12 kids, if I'm not wrong.
right, correct, and
And
correct.
and then 12 kids. I'm this is very, very important, because when I go through the Israel, state of Israel, and when you talk about Zionists, so there's a 12, different, what do you say, families grown, which includes, I think, Levites, Judea, and further, more,
Right,
if I'm not wrong, right?
that is correct. Yes, so that is correct. And yeah, so these 12 children, there was Abraham, and then Abraham had a son, Isaac, and he had and there was and the Arab people refer this as Ismail. We say Ishmael.
Ishmael, yeah.
I don't know in English. It's Isaac, and we say
Isaac, yeah.
Yitzchak, and
Ishaq.
Yaakov. We say Yaakov. Yeah, and so basically, but and our lineage goes back to the 12 tribes that you mentioned, the sons of Yaakov, the sons of Yitzchak, and the son of Abraham. So Avram, we say Avram Avinu. So
Yes.
now they went down. Yaakov and his children went down to Egypt, and there they were eventually. After the tribes passed away, their grandchildren were enslaved by the Egyptians, and then they were there for 210 years, and then God took them out with miracles, and then they went to Mount Sinai, and God made a covenant with them. They were led by Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, Musa, you say,
Yeah.
and they will, he went up to on Mount Sinai and went up to God, and took the Torah, which is the covenant that we believe it's covenant and was given to the people, say the Ten Commandments on the tablets, but it means the whole Torah. And
Yes.
that he brought down to the Jewish people. They accepted this. The Jewish people accepted to be loyal to God, to uphold all the laws of the commandments. And this covenant is what makes us the Jewish religion and Judaism. And this is the covenant that we accept. We believe we made this covenant to uphold these laws, and we're never allowed to stray from that till today in any manner, shape, or form. This is the same covenant. We've gone on Mount Sinai. It's 3,000 years. We have to uphold it. To stray from that is not Judaism. It says so in the Torah, and that's what we are obligated to do, and we try with as our best to uphold this. But basically, when they went, God wanted of us to go into the Holy Land when we made this covenant, and but He stipulated that the Holy Land, as the word means holy, that we have to be on a higher level than unusual. That we have to be a holy people, but when we go into the Holy Land, we have to really concentrate on being on a higher level of holiness because the land is holy. It's like, for instance, when a person understands when they go into a house of prayer, their demeanor will be different than when they're standing outside. So we have to be in a high level of holiness. Now, this is what the Jewish people accepted upon themselves. Now, and God stipulated that, and this says it's many times replete in the 5 books of Moses and the Torah, that if we will not uphold the laws properly on this high level of holiness, then the land will reject us, because it's a sensitive land. There's like an example, a metaphor is the body. If you try to make an organ transplant, they give medication that the body should not reject because it's sensitive. The same thing that the Holy Land will, God forbid, reject us if we're not on that level. We were sent the prophets throughout this time period that we were there, that they kept on warning the Jews, they're giving them words of strife, whatever that they should, if they're not, when they weren't up to par, and they're warning them that they're going to be that they're not up to the level that they're supposed to be at a certain times. When that happened, they said that if you won't be up to par, you will be rejected from the land, and that came about. Let me just say that between that, after that period of time, there was the King David, who was anointed at the commands of God, and then he had a son, King Solomon, who built the temple. Then that was destroyed because the Jews were not up to par, and then there was a second temple, was also destroyed. When that was destroyed because we were not up to that level of holiness that we were supposed to be. Remain on, and just 1 second, and then we were sent. God warned us through the prophets that we will be spread out throughout the world into exile, and that is what happened after the destruction. By the destruction of the temple, we were dispersed throughout all the world, and we were put under oath under 3 oaths of God, and that oaths are actually words of prophecy. When King Solomon, who built the temple, actually wrote a book of prophecy called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, where he wrote the 3 oaths that God put us under, and that when we will be sent into exile, that we should obey these 3 oaths. And the 3 oaths were that, 1, we should not attempt to return en masse in large numbers, or force. We should not return to the Holy Land. Secondly, we should not rebel against any nation. We should be loyal citizens in all the lands that we are dispersed amongst the world. We should be loyal citizens, praying for the well-being of that land, being generally, as I say, giving respect for the leadership and so forth. Even if they tax us and more other than the other people of the land, we still have to be loyal citizens. Thirdly, not to make any attempt to end the godly decreed exile, because we're sent into exile because of our sins, and therefore we should never make an attempt to end this godly decreed exile, because it's not because of our physical lacking that we were driven from the Holy Land. It's because we were not, because we sinned, we're not up to par. And that is why we have to be patient in exile, because God is all compassionate. He sees our suffering, and then he himself will eventually end exile, where all humanity will recognize one God, not become Jewish, but everybody will recognize one God. Then we will be returned. God will see that we're gathered together. We will go up and serve him, and God will rebuild the temple. So the Jewish belief is that we were sent into exile around 2,000 years ago, and that we're under oath not to attempt to end this exile or to return in large numbers. We'll make our own sovereignty, our own nationalism, and be patient, just be good, holy people, and the day will come when God, with his compassion, will end exile, where all nations will recognize one God. There's two purposes in our exile. One is that we should eventually better ourselves, that we should be able to return. Secondly, we should be, God does everything is perfect. God is the perfect king. So he wants us spread out amongst the nations, that when we're ideally serving God properly, we should be an example for the world of how a human being should be in a holy nation, serving God properly, a light unto the nations. So it serves a dual purpose, our spread out amongst the nations. And then the day will come with his compassion when God will take us, gather us back, where all nations, they will not be, it's not they will become Jewish, but everybody will recognize one God, and all humanity will serve God in harmony. And it will be the will of humanity that we should return, and God will build the temple, not us. It will be without any human intervention, and all humanity will recognize and serve God in holy temple, as they will throughout the world. But there will be a holy temple. So our returning won't be a concept of a Zionist state of Israel, nothing at all like that at all. It will be a concept of being close to God, and that all the nations also will recognize the one God. And it will not be against the will of the other people, the inhabitants, and so forth. So this is the Judaism 101. It's basic Judaism. And therefore, we were never, in this 2,000-year period, or as long as, and the period that we were dispersed amongst the Muslim nations, the last 1,000 years or so, we were never considered a threat, even though we were a very religious people, a fervently religious people in practicing our religion amongst Muslim nations around the world. They never deemed us or considered us a threat to them, to the Muslim people, because they understood, the ones who were scholars and who knew our religion, because it's not a secret, our religion, they knew that we're not attempting, we don't aspire to take over the land, that if we have a gun that we're going to run in and take over the land. They understood we have a distinctly different a different belief in the end of time, of the Mashiach, the Messiah. We have a different belief of what's going to be at the end of time. But that's neither here nor there, because when the end of time will come, either we'll be right or the Muslims will be right. It's no difference. But the fact is, what we're doing now is simply serving God and just praying for you to be close to God, and trying to be a holy nation. So we're never a danger. So this issue of what's happening today in Palestine, as opposed to religious conflict, is a total misnomer, is a total falsification, a false portrayal of what is happening, because it's not a religious conflict. The proof of that is that we lived in every Muslim country where there were fervently religious Muslims, and we practiced Judaism, and we were not and we never needed a human rights groups or any type of policing to protect us, because we were able to flourish as Jewish people as we did. Everybody knows that the Jewish communities flourished in Iran, in Iraq, in Tunisia, Egypt, and Pakistan, and in Afghanistan, wherever you'd like. The Jews flourished there as a very, very religious people. We put out our greatest scholars. So you see, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with something new. What is that something new? It has to do because around 150 years ago, a group stood up, a group of people who were actually children already of non-practicing Jews, people who had left the religion, mostly of Reform Jews. Reform Jews is a movement that started around 200 odd years ago.
Sorry, yeah. I can because by going that way, because when you said 150 years ago, I want to go back to that.
Okay.
I know it's history, but when you talk about, I remember I wanted to ask you, when from Egypt, when they got a 10 commandments, coming back to the covenant, and following that, as you said. But I through my research, I have found one of the group. I'm not sure, you can tell me better. I There is some sort of group. I don't know whether those people are belongs to Judaism, or they do not belongs to Judaism, or they hijacked, or I don't know. So you can explain me. So they have tried to build another temple. The first destruction and second destruction of temple, I've read about it, about Titus, about even though when we go back, about the way of Babylonian ways, when Sargon the one, they came and they destroy all those areas. But in some sort of those years, about 200 or 2000 years ago, there is a group of people, they try to build another temple which is towards upside of Golan Heights, if I'm not wrong. And those people started their own ways of
Right.
practicing Judaism. So can you please explain me a little bit that who they are they belongs to actually a Jews, or are they
Right.
belongs to a different religion, or
Right. There were two breakthroughs called the Tzedokим. There was the Cairoites, and they decided that they're not going to accept the teachings of Moses. They're just the written law. That's what they accept, and they literally take the literal translation of the words of the Torah, of the books of the Moses. For instance, it says in the Ten Commandments, so one is not allowed to make a fire on the day of the Sabbath. There's 10 commandments that is to believe in one God, not to serve idols, not to worship idols, and to respect the father and mother, not to kill, steal, whatever. They keep these. They say they don't accept that Musa, we say Moshe Rabbeinu, that God gave him the explanation of all these laws. And that we have to follow according to the explanation that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. We call that Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law. The Jewish people who are Jewish, or considered by us Jewish people, who accept that the Torah is divided in two parts: the written law, that's the 5 books of Moses, and the explanation, which is called the oral that God gave over to Moses, which eventually was written in the form of Mishnah, which was later expanded into the Talmud. The Talmud gets a bad rap in the world, but we follow stringently. Every religious Jew follows the laws of the Talmud. Later, it was codified. The laws were codified to take, because it's massive. It's 20 something volumes. So basically that's the Talmud. And then there was a book, the law books was taken from that. And the Jews have to follow these law books. The Cairoites don't accept all of this. They say it's only the 5 books of Moses. So therefore,
do you think is that connection from that, and then when you talk about these people 150 years ago, they have kind of a connection with them?
No, nothing whatsoever. That has nothing to do with that. Actually the Cairoites is just a group of people. It's not a large group, and that they follow. They make a temple. They have their high priests and things, but they're totally cut off from Jews. And this is not the issue today of this conflict between Zionism, between Judaism.
No, what my understanding, the reason I ask you, I'm going to explain you. You might thinking the wrong way, but don't worry. Basically, the reason I wanted to ask you, because I was thinking maybe they try to build a state of Israel, and they name that state as Israel, if I'm not wrong.
Right, so, but like I say, but it's
I thought maybe they have a hijacked kind of thing,
No. They've been always. They simply they are totally estranged from Judaism for 1,000 years, 2,000 years already, and they're or more already, and they have nothing basically to do with the Jewish people. They have their issues over there, but we don't have. It's not. It's a non-starter and not an issue at all to do with our issue. I can say also all side issues which we could talk about, but I just want the people shouldn't, because I want to just hit the main subjects, the main points here, because this way people should comprehend, and be able to get the issue of this conflict. Zionism came around 150 years ago. They came mostly from non-religious Jews, and their issue was that they didn't want to accept this concept of exile, but none of them just didn't even
So
believe in God. So,
sorry, just a quick question. When you talk about,
yes.
sorry, I'm interrupting you. When you talk about the non-religious Jews, so they are, my understanding is Jews belongs to the family of King David, if I'm not wrong, right? So
Um,
they still belongs to that family, or they just born as a like Jews, or they're just converted as a Jews. You know what I
Well,
mean?
the
Yeah.
law is that if as long as one is born from a Jewish mother, that
Yeah.
means that some from that was came from these people that accepted the covenant, and then born out of from that Jews, they have no legal way of releasing themselves from the obligation of keeping the commandments of the Torah.
Yeah.
He could be uh, 10 generations, of 15 generations, 20 generations back. They stopped upholding the laws of the Torah. It doesn't help. As long as his mother's, it goes by the mother's lineage. As long as his mother's mother, it goes by the mother. As long as they were Jewish, he is the same Jewish as a practicing Jew, just as I am a Jew, and they're
Yeah.
obligated to keep the same commandments I do. If they don't, they're doing wrong. They maybe not knowledgeably, but they are sinning, we believe, if they don't keep the Sabbath and so forth. Uh, so that's the basic. That's by us a big problem. I mean, it hurts because we consider that a sorrowful issue that they're not upholding the laws that they're supposed to, because God made a covenant with us as a nation.
Yeah.
That said, if somebody's mother was not Jewish, their father was Jewish, they're not obligated at all to keep the laws of the Torah. Now, there was a movement around 250 years ago, started by somebody who was, we believe, what you would say a kafir, and some in Arabic or something, a kafir. That means he was a heretic, and he wanted to do like the Cairoites wanted, in that concept, sort of concept, that he said that well, more than that, he said that who said Moses took the Torah from God? So he said he wrote it himself. We consider this blasphemy, and he said therefore you can pick and choose and do what you want. That started the reform. It was called reform. They're going to reform Judaism. That was Reform Judaism, and that started in Europe. But today, the majority of Jews in America, I think, are Reform Jews. The vast majority, maybe. That means that they don't keep the commandments of the Torah according to the way God gave us on Mount Sinai. They drive on the Sabbath. They do everything. They just don't uphold the laws of the Torah. They'll eat non-kosher and stuff. So we consider them not practicing Jews. Does that mean they freed themselves from the obligation? No, they have to just hold the Torah just as I do, but they don't. And their form of Jewish religion by us is totally not Judaism. Reform Judaism, just because they tacked onto the word Reform Judaism, they call it Judaism, that doesn't make it Judaism. Like you won't say Buddhist Judaism or Christian Judaism. The concept of Reform Judaism, or afterwards another movement started called that was called conservative Judaism. In America, there's 3 branches. Today, there's even more. So conservatives saw that the reform went over the deep end. They just didn't keep anything. So they decided to become more conservative than them, more right-leaning. But we consider that also, that's nothing. It's a non-starter, because Judaism is one thing, to uphold the laws of the Torah. But this movement of reform started like 250 years ago. And these people of Zionists mostly came from non-religious Jews. And they just, so they weren't even practicing. They didn't respect our obligation to keep the laws of the Torah. But there were some who did come from religious, but a very small minority. And they decided that to them, they were simply upset with the fact that they were living in Europe, mostly, let's say, in Germany and so forth, and they were not respected, and they decided that they're going to form their unit, and that which they're going to build their own country and so forth, and therefore they'll be able to gain their respect. They'll be a respected people. Why should people look at them and laugh at them as a Jewish people, a backward people? So they decided to form Zionism and make their own country, their own state, where they'll get their respect, and there'll be a nation that has an army and an Olympic team and all the strappings of a nation. They'll be a nation amongst nations. Now, all the rabbinical authorities at that time this is like 150 years ago, stood in total opposition. They said, this is heresy. This is not what Judaism is simply observing the laws of the Torah. Judaism is not to create our sovereignty. It's unacceptable. Not only it's not to create sovereignty, but the concept of building a sovereignty flies in the face of what God wants of us. We are not to try to leave exile and create the sovereignty. And it doesn't matter where on the world, because they wanted to make it in Uganda and Patagonia next to Brazil, next to Argentina. And it didn't matter where you make it. We are forbidden to create our sovereignty. We are in exile, dispersed amongst the nations, because it's to break our haughtiness. It is to that we should be dispersed and be a light unto the nations. This concept of trying to remove ourselves from exile is flying in the face of what God's want of us. It's direct rebellion against God. So we put out a book, actually, called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of, this says 130 years, like it's a little old, a little bit, of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. It's a compilation of the major rabbis from around the world. There's tens of thousands of rabbis, but from all around the world, from the Middle East, from European countries, from African countries, from the United States, from Jerusalem here, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld lived from 1848 to 1932, and he was the chief rabbi, the first chief rabbi of Palestine. Nothing to do with the Zionist rabbinate and their chief rabbi, which is a farce. It's window dressing for their masquerading as a Jewish nation. But the Jewish nation, the Jewish people living in Palestine, had a chief rabbi called the Cairoites, God-fearing community. He was the head Rabbi Sonnenfeld. He was from 1848 to 1932. He writes against the Zionism in Europe. The rabbi, one of the greatest rabbis, everybody recognizes him as one of the greatest codifiers of Jewish law, and he lived from 1839 to 1933. Before the state was created, he passed away. And I'll just quote from him as a very famous man, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Cohen, the Chavetz Chaim was called, and he writes in one of his writings, he writes, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. It's a dead limb that's hanging on to the Jewish people, and it's causing the entire body to rot because it's a rotten branch. So that's the way that was. This was the view of how we looked at Zionism. Now, and let me just show you a picture of what Zionism looked like. So you'll see a picture of the difference between the Zionists and what what their face was. Here, like this was a picture of David Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister, and when they gathered in reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948. 1948 was when they were ratified by the United Nations, and you can see this picture. I mean, anybody can Google this, and you can see who's sitting there at the dais. Who's the people who are representing the Zionists, supposedly the Star of David, which is from King David. And they're supposedly representing a Jewish state, and here nobody's covering their head. Now let's say you'd have a Muslim state, you'd see imams, sheikhs, right? And this is the picture. So what they're actually doing is hijacking, stealing the representation of our Jewish religion, and there's a reason why they're doing it, because they didn't come to sell religion. Zionists weren't interested at all. They detested the religion as a whole. And they write so, but in fact, I'll just mention it now. Even we have another book called Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, which is a historical documents that we compiled, some Zionist statements and the rabbi statements. But let's say let's say the statements of the Zionists themselves, where you have Theodor Herzl wrote in his diary. Theodor Herzl was the father of Zionism, basically, and he wrote. His diary, page 14, his own diary, he wrote, the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna, to get an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. That's his solution to the problem that the Jews are suffering. It should be done on a Sunday in the middle of the day with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion we've done at St. Stephen's Cathedral, that's how, in other words, he's thought about it. He had a whole plan of how this should be done. In other words, his concept of what he wanted Judaism has nothing to do with our covenant with God, what makes us a Jew, what we died for in the Inquisition and Crusades and by World War II. Our Judaism is our covenant with God. That's all it is. Now he came on and decided they're going to transform this Judaism from a religion into a nationalism, a base material concept. That is what Zionism is, a transformation from religion, subservience to God, into nationalism. And that's why it's totally contradictory and antithetical to the Jewish belief. Now, I'll just quote one more, Vladimir Jabatinsky, who was the founder of revisionist Zionism. He was very famous, Jabatinsky, the father of the Irgun and the Lehi, and the father of Begin, who was the prime minister, his mentor, everybody. He was one of the leaders of Zionism. And this is what he wrote in a newspaper, Haaretz newspaper, in 1919, before the state, that's when, and he wrote, in the national home, we will announce, they planned on making a nation. In the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile, and they refuse to shave off their beards and earlocks, payas for the earlocks, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote. This is the Jewish state that's going to make that a person who has a beard. Here they're trying they're supposedly the heroes of Jews, to save them from anti-Semitism. The whole issue of Israel was supposedly to save Jews from the suffering of anti-Semitism. And he says the Jews who have a beard and payas should not have a right to. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. But this is what the people, if looking for the truth, should step back from all the propaganda and all they've been fed for all these years and understand what we're dealing with here. They're being conned, you're being duped. It's like a Madoff. You're being totally false, fed false information. So it's not a religious conflict. It has to do with a total conflict between religion and between anti-religious people who are looking for a nationalism, who detested the religion as a whole, and they try till today. They try to break the backbone of the Jewish religion. Another very important thing to see is that in 1947, a year before it was ratified by the United Nations, that Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who I pointed to before, is another picture of Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who met with the king of Transjordan in this was in the 1920s, and he met with him to tell them, because Zionism already started coming up to Palestine in the end of the 19th century, by 1890s, whenever they were coming up, and they started making their movement. And the Jewish community felt threatened by them. So this rabbi actually wrote letters in Arabic for the Arab newspapers and broadcasted, and he met with the king of Transjordan saying that we're loyal to you and we have no, we're not aspiring, we have no want whatsoever to take over any control. It's against our belief. This is one of the times he met with the king of Transjordan and so forth. Now, and he passed away. And in 1947, the next rabbi was Rabbi Duchinsky. This is a picture of Rabbi Duchinsky sitting with a delegation of the United Nations who came up to study the problems in Palestine. And it's written in the United Nations documents, and I'm quoting from the United Nations documents, in July 16, 1947, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Duchinsky of blessed memory, Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Duchinsky, wrote, and again, it's the United Nations documents, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. We don't want a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. He didn't speak with the knowledge of all the problems that will eventually come from this Jewish state. He simply said, we don't want a Jewish state. So he stood in opposition to the Zionists. Now, the Zionists, actually, as I say, they wanted to make the so-called Jewish state in Uganda and Patagonia. But because of practical reasons, they realized you needed a mass amount of backing to create a land, or to create a country. And they knew they'll get the Jewish support from the ones who don't know their religion, using emotions and talking about our suffering. And they're going to turn to the evangelist Christians who support that the Jews are the children of Israel that have to return to the Holy Land. Arguably, which a lot of people are very upset with, they believe that there'll be an Armageddon where the Jews and the Muslims will kill each other or convert to they will convert to Christianity. If you know, that's their belief, that it has to be that Jews and Muslims have to return. The Jews have to return, and there'll be a war, Armageddon, and they'll kill each other, God forbid, or convert to Christianity. But whatever it may be, even there's many people who totally mean it from humanitarian reasons, but because of their religion, they believe that they should support Jews to return and have control in the Holy Land. So the Zionists used this belief, and they even today, the in numbers, there's many more Christians who are supporting Zionism than Jews. So that's why they turned to make their land in Palestine, and they decided to make their sovereignty, their homeland in Palestine. And in order to give this legitimacy, how could you go and invade another people? So they wave the Bible and they say, "Oh, this is the God-given land to us." These heretics who don't cover their heads, who don't believe in Sabbath, who don't believe in God, many of them, all of a sudden they use the Torah and they roll their eyes and they use the Star of David and they call it the state of Israel. Jacob's name was Israel in the Torah. And they claim that they're representing the Jewish religion. So here two issues. They're falsifying, they're committing a crime, that they've stolen our name, the religious name, willfully, knowing they're using something that's not properly used, because they're nothing to do with religion. They want a nationalism. At best, they want to call it a democracy, and yet they're using the religion, which is not a democracy. We believe that every Jew has to keep Sabbath. They proudly announce you can do what you want there. You can eat pig. You can do what you want, and you don't have to practice the religion. And they don't practice it. And so they're abusing the. Secondly, they're abusing the fact that the three oaths. They breached the three oaths. We're not allowed to return en masse. Clearly, God says we're not allowed to return. We're not allowed to rebel against nations. Here, they're rebelling against all the Muslim nations, and specifically against the inhabitants of Palestine, who the majority were Muslims, and the second group in numbers were the Christians, and the third group was the Jews. All these three people that were living there did not want this Zionist state of Israel, yet they ignored totally the will of the inhabitants, and they, with the backing of the British and eventually the United Nations, so they took control over this land. So they're breaching the three oaths of God. They're heretics. They're rebelling against God and the concept of what a Jew is. And on top of that, Jews are supposed to show gratitude for good done to them. That's the commandments in the 5 books of Moses. It says we have to show gratitude even to the Egyptians who enslaved us because they gave us a home. These are requirements. And here, we as Jews know that for the last 1,000 years, when we went through the Inquisition and Crusades and suffered so much, they tried to forcefully convert Jews in Spain and throughout Europe, many places, to Christianity. The Muslim countries opened their doors, embraced us, and we were taken in and we flourished there. A Jew has to show gratitude for that. That's a commandment of the Torah. So here, instead of showing gratitude for the Muslim nations, they declare that the Muslims hate the Jews, and that is why they oppose the existence of the state of Israel. So we say, how dare they, how repugnant and repulsive that is, because on the contrary, we have to show gratitude for the Muslim people for being our saviors, our giving us a safe haven, a place that we should be able to flourish throughout our hundreds of years that we flourished amongst Muslims, where there were no human rights groups or police to protect us from international groups. We simply flourished in these countries, including in the Ottoman Empire, which was in control of Palestine. We flourished and we lived together door by door. We babysat each other's children. We have many pictures that I like to show how the Arabs and Muslims, and anybody could go to any real history books. That's if it hasn't been edited by the Zionists, where they try to
or manipulated. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the basic concept why we as Jews stand in total opposition to the existence of not only to the settlements and the taking over of over the Green Line, or so what they would call, but the mere existence of the state of Israel is a direct rebellion against God. We never accept it, and we to add to that, we have demonstrations. constantly, from day one, the Jews have been standing, and we don't carry guns. We demonstrate, and we've been brutally beaten. You can see what's happening to the Jewish people, whether it's old people. We have thousands and thousands of pictures on our sites. We had special sites that were taken down by YouTube and Facebook. They simply
Facebook,
took
yeah.
us off the site. Why? Because we're against Zionism. It's unbelievable how they did that. We never speak about taking up arms. We never militant. We don't carry guns, but we demonstrate, and our rabbis have been assassinated. Look at this. Children are beaten, arrested. It's
And that is in America, right?
No. This is in the Holy Land, in occupied Palestine. This is ongoing daily. This is continuing.
So
from
are
day
you,
one to
just
today.
a quick question, are you guys allowed to go to Israel or not?
Okay, so now when you ask if we're allowed to go, so our community lived there before the Zionists, and we have tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands who are living there, and they refuse to accept the existence of the state. So they go out. We have our communities that till today we have a chief rabbi over there, and I could show, for instance, when this is taking up when the other chief rabbi passed away, because it's a lifelong job till they pass away. And the last one was taken up in around 19 years ago. Rabbi Weiss is the present one. And when they took them up, you could see literally hundreds of thousands of people greeting the chief rabbi of the Jewish community of Jerusalem, that means of Palestine. Nothing again to do with the rabbinate or the chief rabbi of the Zionists, which the world recognizes as chief rabbi. By us, we look at them as a farce, as nothing. But we have a chief rabbi there, and you can see the hundreds of thousands in the streets of Jerusalem gathering to take them up. We have these people, and these people go out and demonstrate. We have demonstrations around the world, not only over there, but in New York and Washington, D.C., wherever we make constantly. Wherever there's a very religious community around the world, you will find that we demonstrate, we go out on the streets. In fact, let's say in New York, we have the largest Jewish community, most probably outside of Jerusalem, and the largest concentration of religious Jews is right across from Manhattan. It's called in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and there's not one single Israeli flag there. In London, if you will go to Stanford Hills, where the most religious community is, and you'll drive around, you'll see it's very hard to find one Israeli flag there, because being that they're very religious, invariably, the more the religious the community, the more anti-Zionist they will be. So again, we demonstrate over there also. We get threatened, our lives get threatened, but thank God there's police who protect us more or less to the most degree, and we're thankful for that. But in Palestine, they demonstrate and they get attacked, they get sprayed with chemicals, they get brutally beaten and murdered and assassinated. And not only assassinated, but we have a rule that we're not allowed to, we don't want to serve in their army. And your question was if we're able to live there, so we're living there. But many Jews leave because they don't want to be under this occupation. So tens and tens of thousands of Jews have moved to the United States and to London and all, because they simply, because of their moral, because they refuse to live under the occupation. Not everybody can move. It's very hard to move, and it's very hard to get visas to move. We have to move to where there's a Jewish community. So it's very hard for the Jews. Many want to leave, and it is extremely hard to leave. So you have hundreds of thousands still living there, but they don't serve in the army. This is, by the way, the picture I wanted to show you, how Jews live together in peace and harmony, old pictures from before the state, and still ongoing today. And today, like I was saying to you, the Jews are demonstrating in Palestine. You can see this all the time. We have different demonstrations ongoing with Palestinian flags. And we have pictures that they're constantly getting arrested, because every Jew who turns 17, whether it's a boy or girl, they have mandatory military service. And mandatory military service means that if you're not going to the army, you're a criminal. So every boy and girl who turns 17, they get arrested or something to that. They're harassed. So here you see a girl, they force them into prison. Instead of prison outfits, they put them on the army uniform to demean them, to break them psychologically. Here she's just carrying a prayer book and crying behind bars. And this is ongoing. Right now, and to show how, what hypocrisy it is, right now, this last week, and you can see the last, they not only are they trying to break the backbone of the Jewish people by forcing them to the army, or the occupation of Palestine, which they're doing, constantly, and they're killing people over there. which we demonstrate, by the way, around the world. We go on demonstrations. The world doesn't report this demonstration. We just were, this Sabbath, my colleagues were in New York because they had shot and killed a Palestinian child, as they constantly doing these. So we're demonstrating on the streets. People walk hours because we can't drive in the car on Sabbath. We walk hours to the Palestinian marches and march with them in solidarity. But this is going on. Not only that, but beside that, they breach. They have disregard and no respect for the Jewish laws. So they dig up bones because for archaeological purposes, the Jews lived there like 3,000 years. So they have a boon of rich heritage to be able to study bones, or they want to build a hotel and there's a graveyard, or they try to build the Krush 6, it's called, the main highway. So they want to make an extension. It's going to break through a Jewish graveyard. They have no respect. They do it. So here you have this last week in Har Cher, I think it's Har Hermon, they were, and they decided to dig up graves from rabbis of 2,000 years ago. And here you see them standing. They were attacked, the Jewish people. Here you see a picture of the chief rabbi I mentioned, Rabbi Weiss, who's the present chief rabbi. He went with a car to demonstrate, and they threw what is it called, shock bombs at the car, not even respecting our chief rabbis and so forth, and the older rabbis. So this is ongoing, what's happening there, and the world is silent. I could just say in the Arab countries or in the Muslim countries, I was in Iran, I was in Egypt. I could tell you the respect that these countries show for the Jewish graves is laudable, is beautiful. In Iran, they have Daniel, they have Mordechai and Esther, and they have many of the prophets are lying there, and they're given the greatest respect. In Egypt, they decided to make the ring road. That's a road that they decided to, in order to make to alleviate the traffic jams. So they made around Cairo a big road. And that road that it had to pass through a cemetery, a large old Jewish cemetery. They went and they built it on pillars that they should not disturb the graves. It cost millions of dollars, and nobody demanded, that, and they made an issue of it, and it went through quietly, and they did it as respect to the Jewish graves. Now the Zionists, we stand there, and we get our bones are broken because our boys and girls have to stand there to stop them from digging, which they can easily do. They don't have to do it, and they're forbidden to do it. So I say they have no respect for the law, yet they walk around. If in Egypt or in Pakistan or in anywhere they would go and they would do such a thing to one Jewish grave, they would be all over them and yell anti-Semitism. So the hypocrisy is beyond words. The inhumanity is beyond words. What they're doing to the Palestinian people, the oppression, they're throwing them out of the homes, the killing, what's happening in Gaza, in Sheikh Jarrah, all these places, what's happening is beyond words. We demonstrate, we go out as Jews, we go and we stand in solidarity with the Palestinians, we cry, we hurt with them. And the world doesn't know this because the world press, that's the mainstream media, if they are being watched by the Zionists, and if they show too much sympathy or too much reporting on anything that's happening in Palestine that's leaning to the Palestinian issue, they're right away labeled as anti-Semitic. So, and that's why we're here to tell the world that this is not only is it not anti-Semitic to stand up for the Palestinians, on the contrary, the Zionists are the greatest exacerbator of anti-Semitism. They are the ones who are causing the blood spilling of Palestinians, of Muslims, of Jews. All the bloodshed are they, because as Jews and Muslims, we live together in peace. They are the ones who are the instigator, the ones who brought about this conflict and the hate and the mistrust between Jews and Muslims. And around the world, that Jews today are looked at with mistrust, and all the turmoil is the repercussions of what the Zionists are doing by they're stoking the fire and doing in the Middle East. And the Muslim people around the world look at what's happening in Palestine, and they look at the Israelis waving and calling themselves a Jewish nation and the Star of David. So they say, oh, so all Jews are complicit and are part of this. So we stand up and tell the world it's not Judaism. And because we are Jews, we oppose the Zionism, the ideology, and the existence of the state of Israel. It's a rebellion against God, and it is the cause for undermining the peaceful coexistence between us all.
Yeah, just a quick question. When thank you very much for your deep information about the Zionism. And I completely agree with that. And I've got quite intense knowledge about how the presidents and prime ministers, or how they manipulate, for their own, existence of Israel, and it's still happening. You can see last 5-6 years, especially the previous president was like quite, pushing to build, that Jerusalem is a part of, Israel, as the capital of Israel. So it's quite a lot of things happen. So, but now concept of, we talk about belief, because whatever is happening across this world, it's belongs to, like, either is a Muslim or Jews or a Christian, based on belief, and belief is about Messiah. So I wanna ask you, like, I have got a different concept of Messiah. Probably you have a different concept of Messiah, but there's three different people we are talking about. Number one is Christ. Moses coming, like Jesus coming back, for example, is belongs to Christianity. Then Messiah is coming in Judaism, and then in Islam, it's Mahdi is one of the, religious person is coming as well. So it's the three people we're talking about virtually. What do you think, that what concept of Messiah in you, that he belongs to? You can see last, since pandemic has started, a lot of voices coming out from the government of Israel, that this Messiah is coming before this pandemic pass over, and he will sort out everything. So I mean, I need to understand the concept of Messiah, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, well, with the help of the Almighty, firstly, the state of Israel is uh, clearly uh, estranging themselves from any religion, although they claim they're a Jewish state, and if you oppose them, you're anti-Semitic, and they try to pass laws around the world that you're not allowed to speak up against Zionism because you're
Yeah.
anti-Semitic. But they, at the same time, which it's very hard to understand because it's simply contradictory in and of itself, but they claim again that they're a democracy and you don't have to uphold the religion, and they keep on pushing to have reform, that I mentioned, reform rabbis who don't believe in God and Moses, who don't believe in the 10 Commandments and so forth, that should be part of their rabbinate, and then on and on and on. So I don't really buy for a minute that they're talking about the Messiah. But it depending, if they can make $1 million or maybe even less than that, then they'll speak about the Messiah. But it's nothing to do with reality or truth, and it's just a farce. But I don't even think they bother to do that anymore, or they ever did, because as I showed you from the beginning of time, they just simply speak about nationalism. And yes, they speak about how proud they are that they are the home of the different religions and so forth, because anyway, to be able to get support, monetary support, money, or that people should look at them as the protectors of that area, and the Arabs and the Muslims as a threat to the area, and therefore they'll gain control, or like in Jerusalem. So they'll speak about the Messiah, if you like, when Netanyahu went to the UN and started speaking about how God gave us the land. And the hypocrisy is beyond words, as I say, because totally ignoring the words of all the rabbis that we're not allowed to have since the destruction of the temple. So, like I say, they do autopsies. We're not allowed to do autopsies. When a person dies, we have a special group of people who run to the hospital to stand by the dead body, that they should not cut up the body, which they do for simple, studying the dead. It's forbidden. I could go on and on and on how they disrespect the laws of the Torah, or they drive on the Sabbath, which is from the 10 Commandments. So it's all a farce. So let's put that aside. They have nothing but Messiah or anything like that. It's a total political movement that is, and the Jewish religion as the concept, as the Jewish nation, stopped after the destruction of the temple. Yes, we aspire one day that God will return us, as I mentioned before, and will bring the Messiah. We'll talk what that is with God's help. But if anything, the concept of making a so-called Jewish state, the state of Israel, is an impediment, because it's a rebellion. It's sinning against God. And what we believe is we have to repent and then God, with his compassion, will gather us all in to serve him in harmony. Now, usually, as a rule, we are reluctant to get into a philosophy of religion, because we're not here to espouse, to try to sell our religion to other people. One of the Jewish beliefs is that we believe that God created the world and all humanity, and that God wants every person to follow the 7 commandments of Noah, which is that to believe that God gave Moses the Torah. In the Torah, he commanded that every person should believe in one God, not to worship idols, not to kill, not to steal, not to commit adultery, to have a court system in every country. It shouldn't be lawless. It should have a court system, and that there should be not to eat from an animal, even if it's shaking after you slaughter. So there's 7 commandments, and if you will uphold the 7 commandments, you will inherit the world to come. That's a Jewish law, that a person upholds these commandments, and a righteous person will inherit the world to come. You don't have to be Jewish. And if somebody wants to convert to Judaism, the law is that I have to try to dissuade them from becoming Jewish. It's very interesting, but that's the fact. If somebody tries to become Jewish, we advise them that you can serve God without being Jewish. If you become Jewish, then you must uphold all the commandments of the Torah, which is 613, whichever is applicable, which means that you have to keep the Sabbath, you have to keep kosher. There's many, many laws. And if you convert to Judaism and you won't uphold the commandments, then you will be considered a sinner. So we try to dissuade. And secondly, we believe that people have suffered throughout the ages because we believe everything is the hands of God, and God tries to remind us to repent and so forth. So a person can suffer anti-Semitism, can suffer different things. Not what the Zionists are causing anti-Semitism, but I mean through the ages, even they were righteous Jews, good Jewish communities, and yet they were harassed, and they were tried to be in the Inquisition. And so we tell people that, why do you need that? So we dissuade persons from becoming Jews. That said, if anybody wants to become Jewish, anybody can become Jewish. There's no such thing. If a person wants to become Jewish, but we dissuade people from becoming Judaism. But that's not our issue. So we're reluctant to have a philosophical issue of. But I will say, you're asking about the Messiah. Our concept of the Messiah, it says in our law books, from Maimonides, Rambam, he's called Maimonides, very famous from Egypt, Moses ben Maimon, blessed memory. So he writes the concept of the Messiah. We believe that one day he will be from David, King David, or from one of his offsprings from the generations, and that God will send him, and he will, and Elijah the prophet will come before he comes, and there will be a spirit of repentance. There will be a spirit around the world where people will repent and serve one God, and we will recognize that there's one God in the world, and all humanity says, and there will come a day when all humanity will join arms and go up and serve God in harmony. So the concept that we will come and stand with a gun and say to everybody, you must give me back the land because God gave me that land, with an Uzi or with their phantom fighters or whatever the Zionists have. This is so corrupting the Jewish belief that it's beyond words, because we believe the spirit of the end of days will be where there'll be a worldly, an international spirit, throughout the world of serving God and believing in one God. It says the nations will come together and join arms and serve God. So our belief of the Messiah is a concept of a person who will bring the hearts together to come up and serve God and return to the covenant of God. And that is what we hope and yearn for. But we don't do any action, and we don't delve. The Rambam himself, Maimonides, says we should not delve into the issues of when the Messiah will come. We should just do our thing. We should practice the religion, be rightfully, and when the day will, and pray for that. We yearn. Every day a Jew prays for the way when God will reveal his way, not because we're looking for our personal betterment, but that we want to one day that God's glory should be glorified throughout the world. In other words, we have to, in our daily life, we have to try to better our ways in order to be for God's glorification. But the ultimate, the pinnacle of this glorification is when the world will recognize one God. That is the concept of Messiah. In a very religious community, they are never delving and busy with Messiah, 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 except that daily in all our prayers, we urge and we yearn and pray for God when our prayers start and end that there's one God, and that there will be a day when God's glory will be revealed throughout the world. It's the last day's words of our prayers every day.
Okay, thank you so much. I would have like to ask last question, which is probably a very controversial, but I'd like to ask as I'm very open to anything. The question is, you will see like across the whole world, lot of predictors, around the world and predicting about end of time. Oh, this many years left, this many years
Right.
left. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a lot of
Yes,
conspiracy
certainly.
theories. However, I have got the opportunity to read prophecies of Daniel. If you read about it, it's like
Yes.
quite
Yes.
very
Yes.
futuristic kind of
Right.
prophecies. So, what do you think in terms of the time, the pace they have started, especially building this state of Israel, and then when the previous president was talking about, especially when he was leaving the White House, and he was like raises his head up there, and he said, "Oh, I am the chosen one." Probably you have watched or not. Is very like critical. So, what do you think the prophecies or the predictions they have? Do you think the end of time is literally ahead, or what do you think, or is still good according to like as in Islam, or when I talk about uh, prophecies of Daniel, as Daniel alayhi salam? So we believe like, 'cause these are all the prophets, even Moses, Jesus. So what do you think the predictions or the people are doing, even religious people or non-religious people, mostly religious people? And according to my research, where I am standing right now, I have read one book which is very controversial. It's called The Secret Histories of the World by Jonathan Black. Maybe you heard, but he's not part of it, but he described a lot of things, what's happening across this world. So what do you think the time and the end of time, according to, like, I'm quoting the Jewish references here, that 2500 years they have recognized, like, okay, this is the sort of the time which is like the whole world will
Right.
wrap up, and so what do you think
Right.
about it? It's the last thing
Well,
and we will end up.
right. Okay. So with the help of the Almighty, it's not what I think. I'm going to simply tell what in the Jewish across the board in the very religious communities we follow, as the Maimonides says, that he says that we should not delve into the future, what will be. Now, we believe, like the prophets wrote in the form of metaphor. Daniel's writing is in the form of metaphor. By the way, in Daniel, it does say that like the king commanded that he should bow down, and he refused to bow down, and he was thrown into the lion's den, and he was saved by God. But he said to the king, when it comes to taxation, you are my king, and I'm ready to pay whatever costs, whatever you decree upon us. But when it comes to serving God, if you try to stop us from serving God, you and the dog are the same. In other words, I will give you the respect as king. But if you try to stop a Jew from upholding the Torah, then we have to give our lives for that. So that's basic, and that's in Daniel also, by the way. So I'm just saying, and that's the way the Jews always did. That we stood, and again, I'm just to regress a second, by the Maccabees, which is very famous. The Zionists used the Olympic team they call the Maccabees and so forth. Now, it's just an abuse of Judaism again there, because the Maccabees were in the time of the Second Temple, and the Greeks. At the time, the Jews were under the rule of the Greeks when they had the temple, and they paid a lot of taxation and so forth, and yet they didn't rebel. But when the Greeks came in, they said they're not allowed to observe the Sabbath or circumcise their children and whatever the different commandments. Then the high priest and his children stood up, and through a miraculous, we were saved, and we celebrate the holiday of lights because they found pure oil and they were able to. So our whole issue of that holiday is called the holiday of lights, Chanukah, because we were saved by God and we were able to have the purification in the temple. Yet the Zionists use it as if it had to do with power, because it was a miracle. It was a few 7 people against the king, a whole Greek army. Yet they totally twist the Jewish religion to use it in their form, and has nothing to do with their power, the force, the show of force, what the Zionists are doing. It's another, or the repugnancy of Zionists. But getting to the end of time now, Daniel, like I say, said that we have to be under the rule, to accept, to be under the sovereignty of whatever nation we are. And he speaks of the prophecies of the time, the future, the end of time, but it's all in metaphor. And like Maimonides says, we're not allowed to delve. We just know we study the books of the prophets, but we do not attempt to translate that into saying, oh, so now I know when the end of time is. The end of time is hidden from us. That's a very clear for the Jewish people. The end of time is hidden. We do not know when God, with his compassion, will bring it. You'll find people who are non-religious or marginally religious are busy with the end of time, and they have all different types of proofs. But the ones who are truly religious, the truly religious community in any part of the world, we are not busy with that. We study the Torah. We try to better ourselves and do that. Our actions should be worthy that God should bring with his compassion the end of the exile, and that the whole world should serve him in harmony. But we are not to delve or try to understand these prophecies to really when it will be the end. So we really have no idea when it is. If you hear from the Zionists anything, it's just a bad joke. It has nothing to do with Judaism. But we don't delve into that. We really don't know. Again, we hope that it's soon. We've seen signs that it seems to be soon. We believe the Holocaust, where so many of us were murdered. We believe, many rabbis said, if it wouldn't have been for Zionism, for the corruption of that, then God, after the Holocaust, it would have been the end of the exile. But unfortunately, people started rebelling so badly that it causes the delay. Rabbi Teitelbaum, blessed Mary, who passed away to this day. This is tonight is the anniversary of his passing, and he was the chief rabbi of Palestine, by the way, and he was a big fighter against Zionism. Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, blessed memory. Anyway, and he came to America. He left it by himself. He left. As the name with the name chief rabbi, came to the United States around 50 years ago, and he rebuilt the whole community and urged people to leave. And he built. We have around the world. It's called Satmar Rabbi Teitelbaum, and all of this. He has schools around the world, and who are anti-Zionist, and he really in New York and so forth. And he was one of the biggest fighters. And with the name, the chief rabbi of Palestine, he lived in New York and urged people to continue. So we left. We shouldn't be under the Zionist control. Yet again, so the concept of the end of time, we hope that God, with his compassion, will bring it today. Still, the end of time. And that we will merit to see that. We will all merit to see the revelation of God's glory. We don't know when it will be, and we can't translate the prophecies. We can try to understand, so that's the Jewish outlook of that, of how it will be.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Weiss. A really, really pleasure to meet you here, and thank you so much. And hopefully we'll keep in touch with you like in future as well. And thanks a lot for your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great honor. Like I say, we want the world to understand, as a Jews, in the name of my brothers and sisters in Palestine, we cry and hurt for the Palestinians. We hope that God should help, that they should it should be a free Palestine soon nowadays, entirely with the total peaceful, God help, and speedy removal of the impediment to peace, the Zionist state of Israel, and that we could once again, we can show our appreciation, our gratitude for the good done to us under the Ottoman Empire with the Palestinian people. They were our great neighbors, and we helped each other. We lived in peace. This could continue to be, and as in all the Muslim lands, we should be able to live in peace and harmony, and ultimately the revelation of God's glory sooner nowadays. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
We'd love to come, and again, we'll come again, and whether it's virtually or in person,
One-to-one, definitely.
to all the Arab Muslim lands, to Pakistan, Afghanistan, all over, and spread the word, and we should show that we are not in conflict with God's help.